Welcome to day one, session 4, hospitality and entertainment industry on the edge of fundamental shift through new age technologies. My name is Tracy Hartford. I am the Vice President for Client Services at Windover Construction, a full service construction management firm that works across a variety of markets, including hospitality. I am honored to be your moderator today and have this great opportunity to talk and ask questions of this esteemed panel. First, let me introduce you to Arma Rafat, Vice President of VDC and Technology for Windover Construction. Arma is a leader and expert in the use of the construction industry's most cutting-edge technologies, which help streamline projects and procurement. Arma, I'll give you a minute or two just to provide our guests a little bit more about your background.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be with this great panel to discuss leading edge technology. I lead the VDC and technology team at Windover Construction. We focus utilizing digital prefabrication, BIM, laser scanning, drone mapping to improve efficiencies on hospitality projects and to improve how we build modular. And excited for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Arma. Next, I would like to introduce Fred Gordy, the Director of Cybersecurity for Intelligent Buildings. Fred is a smart building industry expert and thought leader with 20 years of experience in secure control system development and implementation for Fortune 500 companies throughout the US and abroad. Fred, would you like to say a few words about your background, please?
Absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity to participate with these guys. I'm definitely honored. Very quickly, I have been in the industry for about 20 years. Prior to that, I was an IT guy, and one of the main problems that I've seen through the years is just the lack of communication between OT and IT. And I'm sure all of you guys are very familiar with some of the things that have been going on in the news. This is not a trend that's going to slow down. So that's what my company and I do. We specifically focus on cybersecurity for operational technology or building control.
Thank you, Fred. Someone we all need to know these days, especially. Now let me introduce to you Robert Stevenson, CEO of Intellity. Intellity is the provider of the most comprehensive guest engagement and staff management platform for the hotel, casino, cruise, and luxury residential markets. Robert, would you like to say a few words about yourself and your company, please?
Sure, great. I'm excited to be here and with my fellow panelists. Looks like a great discussion coming up. Yeah, I'm with Intellity, and we do exactly what sort of the mission statement says. Our platform connects guests in the most comprehensive way possible, mobile device, in room, in the lobby, and connects with the staff back of house and does service requests, work orders, all those kinds of things, and very intricate down into mobile and keyless and contactless type technologies. It's been a really wild ride for us through the pandemic.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. Finally, I would like to introduce James Lemon. James is the founder and CEO of Atalo, an online community that connects everyone with a passion for hospitality. Atalo was created by and for passionate hospitality people, and a place where people can rebuild their careers, mentor one another, and connect. Would you like to say a few words about your organization too, James?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. And hi, everyone. Good to be here. I'd like to represent Europe and the rest of the world on this panel today. Absolutely. So Atolo didn't even exist 12 months ago. So we really are a child of the pandemic. We've set up a mentoring program with kind of our innovation and disruption really aimed at the heart of hospitality, which is its people, bringing people together, getting people out of their silos and exploring ideas in a single place where we can innovate, plan for our futures, rebuild our careers, and rebuild an industry we all love. I've spent a decade or so in hospitality, having seen hotel chains, technology companies, startups. So it just felt like the right time to start bringing all these different pockets together and see if we can get more creative and smarter and build a stronger future. So definitely an optimist, and look forward to sharing a bit more over the next 45 minutes or so.
Perfect. Thank you all. Now let's kick this off. So I'll start with you, James. So you obviously have gone through, you've built this company through this pandemic, but what are some of the main changes you have seen impacting the markets you serve in the last 15 months?
Yeah, look, I think it's been probably overanalyzed what's happened to hospitality. Absolutely, with probably the world's biggest industry of 300 million people, absolutely one of the hardest hit. I think at one point around 50% of the workforce around the world were furloughed or out of work. really it was about, phase one was about survival, right? It was about keeping doors open of our hotels and our restaurants and our events companies. And now, of course, us as suppliers, I suppose, to that industry, making sure that we were okay and our teams were okay. I think we're now solidly in a phase where it's all about our people. We realize that the last 15 months have just meant millions of people have left the industry with no plans to come back. Those that are coming back are facing huge challenges with smaller teams and higher expectations than ever. I think the industry at its heart has exactly the same goal, which is how do we deliver great experiences time after time, giving our guests a great experience that keeps them safe and is worthy of paying for. But we are in a tough spot right now. I'm sure, again, it's definitely the voice of Europe and the UK right now. We have hundreds of thousands of open vacancies in hospitality, people just not seeing it as an industry that is aspiring or inspiring. And I think really that is the challenge for all of us going forward. How do we get people excited from entry level all the way up, that this is a broad, diverse industry of technologists and marketeers and commercial and operations. And, we need to be bringing people in and showing them how diverse and how broad and how exciting and how international it can be. That's our challenge now, and definitely when we try and work on at Atollo, because I firmly believe the answers the industry needs are in the heads of its people. But I just don't know how we can pull together and get it out and get the word out that hospitality is back, and we're here to do some great things.
No, I agree. I think the optimism is what's going to help us kind of ride out some of these challenges we're all facing right now. It has definitely been a wild ride for hospitality and many other industries. But Robert, can you talk about how Intellity has dealt with that through this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it has been a wild ride. I think that might be a little bit of an understatement, but I think for us, we're centered. We have deployments all around the globe, but we're centered mostly in North America, and we started seeing impact. I would say January, February from Asia Pacific a little over a year ago, and then it just cratered in March. Hotels closing down and shuttering people and shutting doors and furloughing people and everything else. I think there was a point in April about a year ago where I think maybe about 5% of our properties were actually in some sort of form of communication with us. So, like complete IT shutdown, and wow, we've got to do an update or something. There's nobody on the other end to receive the update, right? So quite a dire situation. And as you might imagine from an economic point of view, that's also very challenging, right? Hotels, when they're not open, they're not paying their bills, right? And we're a vendor to that community. So really, a lot of recovery since that point in time, roughly a year ago, working with hotels, working property by property, brand by brand, and understanding, what is the economic outcome here, right? Is this hotel potentially being foreclosed upon in the most dire situations, right? To situations where some have been able to survive, right? Like they got creative, they were able to bring in maybe frontline workers were staying at the hotel in June, July, August last year, working in hospitals and those kinds of things, and the hotel was doubling up for what it was originally intended for. And just going through one by one, hundreds upon hundreds of hotels, unique situations, in some cases needing COVID relief and needing relief from bills, and us taking that on. In some cases, they needed new features and new things to be able to track things. And we focus a lot on contactless and keyless, sort of capabilities, mobile. That really helped with the hotels that were trying to stay open. And guests and staff, they don't want them to, interact, right? Like this was, when every new outbreak, of COVID-19 was occurring, and everybody was like in paranoia state, right? When you have that contactless capability, that helped, right? So the ability to sort of like manage through both on the tech platform side, but also on the economic side. And we've seen it, we saw a nice jump up about, last summer. We saw some openings happening, summer travel season, some places, some touristy places getting some business. We saw another wave of lockdown in the last part of the year, and then another resurgence of openings really starting in January. And then just a huge amount of openings in March and April. Our entire hotel network is open at this point. Occupancies are climbing. Some are at 100% on the weekends, and some are still making their way up. RevPAR and some of the economic ways hotels measure themselves is still climbing. Room rates are climbing, but I think we're seeing a pretty aggressive snapback. And by the summer travel season, for us, I think we're expecting, pretty much full operation. So it's been tough. We furloughed people. We rejiggered our structure of who's reporting to who and who's dealing with what. A lot of people that were not on the front lines went to the front lines to, okay, work with this hotel, figure out what's going on. How can we help them? What do we need to do in terms of billing relief? What do we need to do in terms of their tax? Should we shut down their instances? Oh, here's a hotel over here that's going bankrupt, right? What do we need to do? Get in line to maybe earn a couple cents on a dollar, And so it's been a full court press, but I'm pleased to see, we're basically out of it at this point, and the deluge of interest in our platform and contactless capabilities is just it's unprecedented, really. So wild time is definitely a way to sort of state it. And I'm excited to see. I mean, James is doing it's like the hotel workers. It's one of the big problems that people have had, frankly, has been hotels are opening up. And they don't have staff, right? We can't do stuff. Like people are not excited about coming back to work, or they don't know. Maybe they're a new hire for the front desk or for food and beverage or whatever, and they don't know, right? Like, hey, is it okay to go work at a hotel? And so we're seeing a lot of question around that, and frankly, a lot of the resurgence and reopening is limited, frankly, by service industry professionals coming into hospitality.
No, thank you. And tech has definitely been a saver for all of us during this pandemic. And obviously, with the headlines these days, cybersecurity is definitely front of mind for everybody these days. Fred, a familiar headline, as we know all these days that we keep looking at these headlines, if there are cyber attacks on buildings happening at an increasing rate, why don't we hear more about it?
The biggest thing is through the years with IT, we started working with personal data. I mean, in the hospitality industry, there's a lot of credit card swapping and that type of thing. So these guys are opportunists. And so with IT, it was fairly easy to get in and grab some of the data. Because it was personal data and healthcare data and that kind of thing, there are regulations that require that be reported. But in my world, what we do, there's never been any regulations. Now, there is some movement towards that. In fact, Ann Nuremberger just released a memo. It was not a regulation per se, but it's kind of a precursor to what may be coming. But so the reality is we see it almost on a weekly basis. Buildings are being hit. Systems are being hit, but you're not hearing about it in the news simply because there's no regulation that you are required to report it. And quite frankly, people don't want to report that they got hit because that's actually can cause brand damage. And so that's what we do is we try to help prevent that. But I would like to say, to kind of go back to the pandemic piece of this, is when all of this started happening, we were kind of wondering, well, what's our industry going to look like? Because we go across commercial real estate, military bases, data centers, hospitality, entertainment. And so, we could see this impact coming. Well, we got adjusted for what that impact was going to look like as a company. But in reality, what happened is, I'm not trying to say this was a good thing, but what it did was that shift to remote working. Well, the facility staff that is responsible for these buildings had to come up with some way to be able to control those buildings and monitor and everything. They've always had the ability to come in remotely, but it just exponentially increased. So what our job was to make sure that they were doing this in a secure way. And so now, like I believe, as Robert said, you don't have the employees coming back. Well, they're now looking to do more with less, so to speak. So even more so, these buildings are getting smarter and smarter and smarter. The problem with that is the industry as a whole has remained relatively the Wild West, if you want to say. So there's not been any regulations, any kind of policies or that kind of thing. So nobody had to follow any guidelines. So as I said earlier, the bad guys are opportunists. So what they saw is the IT side of the house has gotten harder and harder to get in. My side is relatively a wide open door. And the thing is, you never know if those networks are connected. And so the bad guys will come in, sit on this network that's not being monitored, and they can we've had some sit there for 2 years and never get noticed. But what they're doing is they're using that as a jumping off point. Then you have the others. We had one customer, they got in, they got ransomed. They were able to recover, but it made the bad guys mad. So they went in and destroyed the central plant, and it took them 92 days to get back online. And they did that just out of spite. So the industry has changed, but in some, I always like, even though I'm in cybersecurity, I like to look at the optimistic side of it. This has made my industry wake up and say, it's time to get busy, and we are. And so I think we're going to see some improvement on these systems. Thank goodness. So.
No, that's a good point. And I think these trends or this happening, I think technology has been a big key factor for many industries, and obviously for your industry, but also for construction. So I wanted to turn it to Armor to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing on the hospitality side of construction, maybe in construction in general, but also focused on hospitality. What are you seeing out there, Armor?
That's a great point, Tracy. There are different components and different project types, but for the trends, there are renovations of existing projects and how we build new projects from the ground, speed to market. In renovations, we have seen in the last 15 months during the surge of COVID-19, how we've been helping clients. For example, restaurants wanted to change the different activities so it matches a new day-to-day activities, and how we can work around their busy schedules and logistics elements, safety, how complex MEP coordination can be done utilizing laser scan. So we go into the existing spaces, and one of the ways we can expedite how we can do fast track renovation, for example, for a restaurant, is to laser scan all the existing conditions, which help us capture all the data we need in few hours and assist the design team to reach a good coordination plan. So speed to market, logistics, tight spaces, using technologies such as the Microsoft HoloLens and mixed reality to show clients how spaces will look like before it's done, which been helping with that. Another aspect that's for existing buildings, and one of them we've been working on a clubhouse, a historic one that has 120-year-old facade elements. We utilized laser scan of their facade and elements to help replicate those historic elements using 3D printing. For new buildings, we have noticed a new trend, which is we've been doing it for years, and building modular construction. Modular construction has been very helpful with hotels because it provides speed to market, save time on site, and has great quality because everything is made in the factory setting. It's greener. So it's everything that hospitality needs in terms of quality. We've been building different buildings with modular here in the New England area with great quality with modular, and all that comes with the modular with the MEP BIM coordination in the factory, which you can control the quality of it. So it's really being flexible with the technology, how we support. It's all in the hospitality. It's all about the guest experience and how we can enhance this. And it carry over. The project doesn't stop when we deliver it. It's actually before we close up ceilings and walls, we scan all the what's behind ceiling and walls. So the client and the facility manager of the hotel and the restaurant 10 years after that can know what's behind ceilings and walls to support their future facility maintenance. So we've been always trying to begin with the end in mind, because that's really helpful for future additions and facility maintenance.
Thank you, Armor. Technology has definitely changed our industry and how we are able to service our clients, especially during this pandemic with minimal physical contact with people. Robert, I want to spin it back to you about what kind of changes have you seen hoteliers adopting in their digital strategies? Because obviously they're changing as well and connecting with their clients on that end.
A great question. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, I think I talked about it a little bit before. The concept of contactless engagement with guests has been a big thing during the pandemic, and it's going to continue. You see it, and when I say contactless, it's not just human to human, but it's like reducing touch points and surfaces. Everybody's gone to a restaurant at this point and done a QR code to get their menu and start ordering things. In some cases, you pull up a menu that you might even be able to just start checking out and ordering things right on your phone. That's really cool. The technology has existed for years, but it didn't exist in people's minds until, really the last year. And that's where we're going. And that's where we're, going to continue, right? So sort of contactless, reduction of surfaces, efficiency in sort of that realm of things. And then the second piece, Fred was talking about a little bit, James talking about a little bit, the lack of staff. So the situation of trying to optimize the back of house operations, right? How much can we do through ticketing software? How much can we do through smart intelligent systems, some AI driven stuff? So, hey, we're running a food and beverage operation inside of this hotel, and we've got all these menus and all this stuff hooked up to different POS systems. How can we make that and consolidate that, make that more efficient, right? Maybe we don't need 6 hamburgers, right? Like, could some algorithm spit out something that says we only need 4, and this is what they should cost, right? So systems on the back end, making life more efficient. Maybe less staff are required, or at least if there are the same level of staff as pre-pandemic, they can be utilized in other ways, more efficient ways, things like marketing, maybe direct guest engagement in some cases that they're going to have a higher impact for the hotel. And then in terms of the guest, it's pretty simple. You give them a choice, right? Like, you want to go down a digital pathway for your journey. Or do you want to go down, maybe you're an older guest, you don't want the hotel app, you don't want to go through all of that. You still just want to talk to somebody. You're completely vaccinated. You're comfortable with that. Great. Go down that path. But there's a lot of people that are going to embrace the efficiency. They're going to embrace the contactless nature. That I got a mobile phone. Nobody sneezed on my mobile phone but me, and all is good. And the hotels are really, really, really embracing that. And you can see it in cross travel beyond hotels, the entire journey, right? Like, you can go on to Google now and book a hotel, and you can basically plan your flights, and all that information gets passed into different apps. And we're going to be thinking about travel in a holistic sense and a digital guest experience from the beginning all the way to checkout, and even maintaining that relationship and digital means way into the future until next time you rebook or whatever you do. So it's just gotten more sophisticated, and it's going to continue to evolve.
Yeah. This use of more apps and systems and digital strategies, I think it's all important. Going back to Fred, because I think that's hot these days. What is the number one attack on building control systems? Because I see that as being an area of focus as well.
Well, as I said earlier, there's not a lot of data out there to the general public about attacks on building control systems, but we've done thousands of assessments across the US, Canada, and abroad. And what I can tell you, it doesn't matter where I am. The number one attack that we've noticed is ransomware. I mean, it's cheap and easy. Anybody can do it. But here's the difference is, the days of IT doing a test on the company where they say, oh, well, you want a $500 Amazon gift card, just click here and you can claim it. Well, what they've done is they modified their attack. They are now going specific to facilities. We have seen things where they're using manufacturer names, and that's not something that's going to necessarily get you, but it would get a facility guy. And the other thing too, like I said earlier about policies and practices, you got to understand in the IT world, if you have a SharePoint server, IT would never let you check your email or look at Facebook or do anything like that on that server. In the facility world, I've got pictures time and time again where the application server, the thing that's actually controlling your building, monitoring things, keeping things up and going, is sitting on somebody's desk, and they sit down and they'll check their email on it. And that right there has cost, and I think I'm actually being conservative here. We, and I'm not talking about it at large, the ones we've been involved with, those simple click emails have cost in the tens of millions of dollars. And 100% of those could have been avoided had the guys actually been using their application server like an application server, which means you don't use it. So, but to go to the application thing, Robert made a comment about, the older guests and stuff. There's also a shift in this world is the guys that were responsible for the buildings, they could run a mechanical system with no thought. They don't need a computer. They can go in there and run it. And that's great. But the thing is they don't really understand the computer side. Now we have a younger workforce that understands applications. They understand computers. The problem is when one of these events goes down and they lose their computer, they don't know what to do with a central plant. They could not go in there and run it. They couldn't. they understand the mechanics, but they don't really understand how to keep that building rolling. So it's a good thing, but it's also identified a huge gap.
No, that's perfect. That's good for all of us to keep in mind and think about that in our own companies. James, I'm going to ask you, how are we or should we be preparing teams for the level of changes that we are all facing right now, especially in this hospitality world? Oh,
it feels like a really common theme, doesn't it? We're all talking about this huge level of change and how people have adapted, but no one's had to respond like our people. And I think for me, like, the first thing to do is just make it a really conscious effort. I think as businesses get back, as teams rebuild, we're actually forgetting potentially to really nurture and develop and make an effort to retain our people, particularly on the hotel side, where we are just in this permanent emergency mode right now. So for me, there's really only three ways to develop your people, right? There's on the job training, which is just, what's the task we're facing now? Do you know how to do it? There's kind of more formal training, classroom training, taking videos, and then there's mentoring. All three of them need a bit of a reboot. If I look at that on the job training, recognize that priorities are going to be moving faster. You know, some of our best hotel clients are having kind of these daily check-ins with their teams, much more of a startup mentality, you know, kind of agility, product management mindset of, okay, we actually need to change the way this restaurant, this hotel, this event venue operates, because the regulations are changing weekly, and the guest expectations, or whether we're even allowed to run events, and of how many people are changing weekly. So you have to have this much higher level of collaboration on the job, and actually making sure that people know what to do next. And I think that gives you a really big permission as well as a leader to say, look, actually, it's okay not to know what to do next. We have all felt like we don't know what to do next in the last 18 months. So really pushing that down through your teams is critical, because otherwise people will assume they should know what to do, and it's absolutely fine that they don't. On the job training is definitely the priority. And then if you think about classroom training, well, hopefully most people have switched now to kind of micro digital learning. You know, the ideas that you can learn about, the kind of stuff Fred's talking about, the kind of thing Robert's talking about. You should be able to pick up little mini certifications, mini learning modules as and when you need it, through watching videos from vendors like this, from, you know, academic institutions. But, you know, let's ditch this idea that we all need to disappear for a week for a training course. Like that's always been questionable whether that does anything. And now there's so many digital tools we're all used to. Let's put some really nice kind of, you know, micro learning videos and you know, inject some of that energy into the business. And then the final one is mentoring, and that's really a Tolo space. You know, mentoring's always been really disorganized. Yeah, how do you find a mentor or a mentee? How do you manage the program? How does anyone know if you're getting any better at it? And how do you know if it's working? So we've effectively taken the dating app model and applied that to mentoring, and are building this kind of global community of people who, you know, say what they're interested in learning about, or say what they know a lot about. We watch what they do at, you know, human events where we do kind of mentor speed dating, and then kind of get them into group mentoring sessions or one-to-one mentoring. We host events where you can talk, but behind the scenes, not that it's important to people, but we're tracking all the data. So we're really seeing through these thousands of interactions that are happening, actually, well, what is working? What's making people come back to that particular person? What is it that's happening in those sessions? So we think that mentoring is the next big kind of disruptable space in development. And really anyone who is thinking about developing a team in a hyper cost effective, very fast, really personal and quite fun way should probably be looking at kind of digital mentoring as just a really smooth way to get teams, you know, onboarded, because you can just tell people you're doing it while you're hiring, get them engaged and trained up, and then get them retained and stop them going anywhere else because you're offering this kind of fantastic opportunity. So that's kind of the way I tackle the three spaces. But the most important thing, kind of where I start, is you've got to make time for it. So one of the things we do at Atollo is, yeah, every Friday morning, everyone has to turn everything off, and we just have to do some reading, or listen to a podcast, or read some articles, or go and chat to a mentor, and then we all come back together. We just talk about what we're learning and put it back into the business. Because I find if you don't do that, your people will not make time for it. many of us have worked in hotels. I spent a lot of time in hotels, and it's just not the kind of place where you would just have a spare hour to grab some time with a mentor. So as a line manager, be really supportive of your team's development. Make sure, almost book that time in, and then check in during their development plans, one-to-one or as a team, and just actually make sure they're following through. Because I think people do want to learn about hospitality. I think people do want to learn about how to bring the best of themselves to work. But we sometimes make it really tough by just not giving them that space or those tools. So that's what Atollo is all about. But it's really a lesson for the whole industry, I think, to think about its people first.
No, I like your idea of rebooting our people strategies. I think that's a great initiative. I think there's a few other things we have to reboot too, thinking of building systems. Fred, are there any cybersecurity guidelines in place for building systems, or what do we have to do to reboot that piece as well to be better at that?
I get asked that all the time because, people are so familiar with the IT standards and policies, or at least in that world, let me just say that. And even in general, people understand that there's guidelines out there. However, in the building world, there is none. Now, I will say this, and luckily I've been invited to be a part of a team. It's made up of people from NIST, ISA, NSA, several high power people, but they also have some of us that actually work in this world, and we're developing those standards. But the reality is, the NIST, I mentioned them. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. They're the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they were around way before there were computers. But for years and years, I've been banging the drum that, hey, you can't do this stuff with IT principles and policies. Well, NIST, the very body that most of these guys listen to, came out in 2019 and said the very same thing. You cannot manage and maintain OT devices, operational technology, with IT principles. Now, the thing is without all these regulations, the guidelines are for the facility people, but they are also for the IT people, because I've got a case right here in front of me where IT decided to push, they got all aggressive and they're like, okay, we're going to protect these systems, right? So they run in and it's a hospital group. So they started pushing out Java updates. Well, guess what? It locked up the front ends. They had to cancel surgeries in 50 of the locations. It cost them over $3 million to do that. And all because a matter of a few minutes, they pushed out an update and they didn't take into consideration all the parameters, because unlike an IT system, there's this just matrix of connectivity through. I mean, you guys know it. I mean, if you go into some of the hotels where you drop your card in and the lights come on and the HVAC comes on, how does that happen? It's people like me in my past life, when I was a programmer of this stuff, is you have to take all that into account. And by us developing these guidelines specifically for this world, hopefully what we're going to do is we're not only going to keep the bad guy out, but we'll never keep the bad guy totally out. But we'll also be able to work with IT to help them understand what it is that we got to do and gain from their years of knowledge of running policies and procedures. We just need them to adapt a little bit.
Thank you, Fred. Talking about rebooting, Armor, how is the architectural engineering construction technology rebooting or evolving to meet the needs and evolvement of the hospitality industry?
Absolutely. So data is the most important part. I agree with James that data, if there is different things we learned this past year, it's about how we can work remotely, how we can utilize technologies that we used before, but COVID will go away, and what lessons learned from the technology we've been using to communicate and to expedite schedules for construction will stay and will help us in the future. One of the most important things I've been seeing recently is the use of AI, artificial intelligence in buildings. For example, helping facility managers inspect these busy buildings and casinos and hotels. You don't have to go to each room or to each roof and disturb the operations. What we've been doing is utilize thermal drone inspections that can fly and detect exactly where the water damage would be. And that devotes our field team efforts to make that fix in these certain areas instead of digging everywhere to look for water damage. So artificial intelligence has been very useful for us and evolving to support us, expedite schedules, and helping clients. It's all about the data we collect. It's a time to deliver clients with 2D as-built drawings is behind us. It's really about the 3D data embedded into the models that can be utilized by the clients, restaurants, hotels, to really communicate, not even to do maintenance and future additions, but also to communicate with their guests. You see, like, communication and embedded to their CMMS systems for facility management. So in AI and data is really how we can help hospitality evolve more, support their busy operations, which will come soon, and that's how we can support these busy operations with minimal disturbance to their daily operations.
Thank you, Amr. We have a few more questions I want to ask before we open up to Q&A, but before we turn it over to Q&A, I want to kind of look a little bit forward, long-term, and pass it to James. How has your customer expectations changed for the long-term? What do you see changing going forward?
Yeah, well, I think if we look at the guests first and what that means for the hotel chains, I think that there's some really exciting new segments of demand that hoteliers are having to respond to. So I spent a lot of time in what you guys call the vacation rental, we call the kind of home sharing, homestay business. And I think there's lots more demand for space and longer stays, which is going to create some really interesting opportunities around kind of apartments and service apartments. I think tackling local demand's been fascinating. People realizing they have a restaurant in the bottom of their hotel that should probably make some money, and getting it out on scooters here in Europe through delivery, and just thinking about that kind of leisure space and food and beverage outlets, I think is fascinating. There's obviously a big leap forward in digital savviness. I'm sure that Robert will be talking a bit more about that, but it's a fascinating space, and I think we've got to stop thinking of tech as something that is happening at the back of the hotel. It's not my job. Technology is really all of our jobs, because we want to help people have a great stay. But I have to say, from all of the people we're working with, from people who've known since they were 10 that they want to be passionate hoteliers, to people who have just kind of thrust themselves on the industry in the last year or so, I think we're all feeling it as we go back out and travel again. This is going to remain an experience business. Even if I can choose a bottle of wine or a beer from an app, actually having someone come and explain it to me and pair it with my food and really talk me through it, I think we're all missing that really human experience. We can order off screens and we can engage with screens anytime, but I think now we're going to think it's much more precious to be in front of people. And so I think the need for us to keep and our customers to keep training their staff to kind of drive that passion, to drive that guest experience right through the journey is going to be essential. Frontline, I think people will always want to have hospitality as a hospitable kind of human-led experience, and I think hoteliers recognize that. But as I say, behind the scenes, it's all about gearing up to be more agile, to be more innovative. A lot of cross-training going on. People from operations working commercial, everyone getting more savvy around data and tech. So it's a fascinating time, and super excited to see that investment in people and the way that kind of mentoring can play a part of that, and the role Atollo can play. So yeah, fun times ahead once we can get over this initial pain, I think.
No, I agree with you with the experience and just pivoting and making sure that we're extending that service a little bit beyond, which makes me think of Armor and construction. What are some of the things that construction can do that's critical to the aspect of what hospitality facility managers are dealing with these days? Where can we help and be different?
That's a great point, Tracy, because one of the most aspects we care about in construction is safety and schedule and working minimal disturbance to the occupied spaces. So, for example, we last year we collaborated with Autodesk and Howick in New Zealand for a system that is telescopic for digital prefab to expedite how we can do fast track projects for interior fit outs for spaces. This is a good example of how we can turn out projects for interior renovation spaces very quickly, separate areas of occupied spaces so guests can enjoy their time safe with noise mitigation, with no more noise, while we are performing construction in a fast track process and maintaining safety. Communication is very important. Communicating with the clients with the 3D logistics planning and safety planning with the clients, because you might be working between two occupied spaces very silently, and with the success of any construction project with the use of today's technology is to really deliver a project in the most safest ways, greener ways, and in the most and also in a way that could protect the quality of the guest experience. And that's what we care about the most. So technology can really help with that a lot with complex MEP coordination. So we make sure that everything fabricated prefab in the factory will be assembled in a very short time on site, not to spend hours on site trying to make edits or prefab things while making noise and welding and all that on site. Everything get prefabbed in the factory, put in a record the time on site, and we done. So managing all these logistics, all these prefab process and complex MEP coordination is really what we should be focusing on as a construction companies to support and to serve the great hospitality projects.
Thank you, Amr. I couldn't agree more on that guest experience, that experience of our clients. My last question before I open up to Q&A, if we have any, Robert, what does the future hold for guest experiences, near term, maybe long term, looking ahead? What do you see there?
I think, you know, my colleagues here on the panel have talked a lot about it. We've got to have great training and great mentoring and get our staff back and active. We have to have, you know, great data and construction and management, you know, for maintenance in the future, expansions, changes, this kind of stuff, technology driving that. Fred, making sure everything's secure. It really is, you know, guest experience is like theater, right? You know, people are putting down money. They want to go someplace. They want to experience something. Maybe it's a more relaxing, you know, sort of intimate experience in a property, or maybe it's an outdoors thing where they're, you know, they're staying in a, you know, a glam sort of tent sort of situation. Maybe they're literally out trekking to some amazing place and getting on the other end and putting their feet in the spa and just hanging out, right? There's a million things that people want to do, and guest experience is very broadly defined. And as you look at that, technology and the human element synthesizing to drive that theater, right? Make sure that people have a great guest experience. I think in the short term, you know, it's the kind of stuff that we're engaged in, you know, contactless, mobile, facilitating a digital you know, guide essentially to go with the guest along the journey. I think long term, we've talked about it in a couple of times here. We've talked about data and AI and facilitation of a great guest experience by supporting the staff, but also having some machine element drives and help make some decisions. And I think the travel experience, you know, hotels and travel in general get a little bit dinged of like, oh, we're behind in technology, you know, we're not cutting edge, so forth. But I think you're getting ready to see in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be really different. You're booking a trip and picking your hotel 10 years from now. It's going to be really fantastic. You're going to have way more options than you ever thought of. You're going to be able to do it all very simply and have a great experience and rinse and repeat, right? And when I say that, I mean not only a great vacation, but perhaps it's a business travel type of experience, right? Like I need to go to this city I'm unfamiliar with, and I need to be there for 2 days, and I'm going to be jet lagged, and you know, blah blah blah, and still walking away from that going, man, that was simple. It was cool. I got to learn, or I got to experience something I didn't think of in my after hours. Man, I'm ready to travel again.
Perfect. Thank you. I have just one question. I'm going to throw it out rapid fire to all of the panelists. Give you each 30 seconds to talk about this topic, but we've talked a lot about hot and relevant topics today. So what are some closing thoughts, tips, or advice, if you had, what triggered your mind in this conversation that you want to share with our audience members today? So I'll start with Amr. Do you have any closing remarks for our team here?
As we've seen here, it's been a great discussion from very different perspectives, which it's a very compatible thing because we all work for the guest experience and supporting these great industries that I love that it comes back. Hope we all meet in InnoFact Show 2022 in person next year. Very much looking forward to it and enjoying those great hotels. Thank you.
I'll throw it to Robert next.
Go out and book a trip, stay in a hotel, tip your workers, tip the guest experience that you're having, you know, take some great Instagram photos, go do it.
Awesome. And Fred?
So I'll always look at adversity as an opportunity. And, you know, we've seen something happen to us that really changed our life. But out of that, I think we've seen a lot of good that's come out of it. I mean, people are refining the way they do things. It was not only a wake up call in the obvious point, but it was a wake up call for business. You know, it's time to change. It's time to be more efficient and to make the most of what you have. But at the end of the day, whether it be in the hospitality industry or commercial real estate, it is 100% about the tenant or guest experience. And at the end of the day, you want to attract them to your building, right? So this is an opportunity for all of us to make ourselves better.
And finally, James, our people person.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, just keep learning. This is such a diverse industry. I don't think anyone around this panel would have thought they would be doing their jobs now 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This industry is always changing. It is made up of every job you could ever want to do. And so be a generalist. Get out there, meet loads of people, hopefully physically, as Robert says, get back out on the road and have some real experiences, but just drop people a note, grab 30 minutes with them over Zoom or Teams and just start learning what on earth is going on in the different pockets of this industry and of course around the world. That's the best way to plan your own career, get the most out of your work, just keep learning.
Perfect. Thank you all. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to Armor, to James, to Fred, and to Robert. Really appreciate your time and your expertise and sharing your tips with us all. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your conference, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.